What is going on, everybody? Drake in here, and welcome back to the channel. I know it seems like it's been a while since I made a sit-down video, and that's because it has. Just with the holidays rolling around, the family being sick on and off, I've had a lot of things going on with work, just a little bit more demanding than it usually is. I got a little bit of reorganizing going around in the background. We're trying to rearrange the house and the living room and stuff, trying to get ahead of spring cleaning. So by the time the end of the day winds down when I usually make videos, I've just been kind of exhausted and tired, and I haven't had a ton of time to get around to making a full-length video for you guys. That's why I've been doing some of the shorts. The shorts are kind of quick, easy. They give you a little bit of content to keep you occupied in the meantime. So I'm going to start getting back into my regular cadence with things. So kind of going into it today, we have a really cool deck tech. It's going to be a subscriber request. A handful of you guys requested this deck tech. It was really fun to make. It was really fun to pick some new and different card choices and kind of pick new ideas that I haven't had a chance to explore before. So this is going to be really, really fun. But before we get into that, 455 subscribers. Thank you guys so much for supporting the channel in that way. Anybody who watches any of my videos, comments, subscribes, likes, it means the world to me. It's kind of why I keep doing this thing. It seems like some of my deck ideas and card choices and thought processes with things are appreciated, and all of your support and your feedback and your recommendations on decks and card choices are appreciated by me. So thank you so much for being involved. If you want to get involved with me on a deeper level, or you want to reach out to me in real time, be sure to friend me on Discord. I'm going to leave that in the description for you guys. I also have a server as well where subscribers of my channel can get together, talk about spoilers, card prices, reprints, deck techs, and get some collective feedback and engagement going with each other and myself. So if you want to interact with me in real time, be sure to friend request me. Also, shout out to his dudeness. He was able to kind of neaten up my Discord server for me, make some rooms, a public chat, let you guys know through Discord whenever I update or upload a new video. So this was really cool. He didn't have to do this, so big shout out to you, his dudeness. I do appreciate that. And if you would like to purchase any of the cards in the deck tech, or the entire deck, or any singles, or any Pokemon cards, or any Yu-Gi-Oh cards, or any sort of supplies or sealed product, be sure to use the TCG Player affiliate link in the description. Bookmark it for future orders. If you do that, I get a little kickback on all your orders, and it is greatly appreciated. And in a small channel like this, every little bit counts, and it goes right back into the channel for a plethora of different things. So yeah, again, things like that are appreciated. They have a really cool sale going on this weekend, 8% back on sealed product and supplies. And if you're a subscriber, an extra 10 to 13% back. So it's pretty nice. A couple cool little spiffs for you. All right, so we're going to get into it. So this was requested by a handful of subscribers. We're looking at Lathliss, the Dragon Queen. Basically, it's kind of a standard dragon tribal build, but it kind of goes off in a different direction or two because it has to kind of branch outside the norm being mono red. So it allowed for some really cool, really creative card choices. Obviously, we really wanted to lean into the ability, the enter the battlefield ability to make these 5/5 dragons and kind of really abuse that and take the deck in kind of, standard dragon tribal direction. So this was a lot of fun. Rules and restrictions when building the deck. There wasn't really a budget. Wanted it to kind of be as competitive as you could possibly make it. I will say I did omit Jeweled Lotus, things like Ancient Tomb, things like Mana Crypt, just because the average player doesn't have those and have access to those as of right now due to scarcity. If you have things like that, you're more than welcome to put them in this deck. But I didn't because most people don't have access to those cards right now. And as always with my subscriber requested videos, take some of the choices with a grain of salt, and I'll talk about more of those things later or as we go through the video. But obviously it's an untested deck, so if you were to purchase this and play it on paper, there are some things that will come out. There are some card choices that will come in. So obviously, again, everything with a grain of salt. But I feel like this is a really good starting point, and it's a really interesting way to take the deck. If you look towards the bottom here, I don't want to spoil too many things, but it has a really nice curve. If you know anything about me as a player, there's two things. I really stress mana curve, probably more than the average player. It's just kind of how I like to operate. You don't have to stress it as much as I do. And I'm a really big value player. So those two things really shine through in this deck. So let's get started. So we have Lathliss, the Dragon Queen. 6-mana dragon, flying, 1 and a red. Dragons get +1/+0 to the end of the turn. And then whenever a non-token dragon enters the battlefield, create a 5/5 red dragon flyer. So this is kind of what we based our deck around. We really want to spam those 5/5 red dragon tokens. And then we could also use the fire breathing to kind of just close out the game or kill a player. And that's kind of how we built the deck. So we're going to start with Sark and Fireblood. Now, going with Planeswalkers in a deck like this, you know, it's a little bit of give and take, but I've always liked Sark and Fireblood, even when I played it in my Dragon deck. I thought this was a great card choice. It just came out because there were so many good dragons in all 5 colors that you were able to put in your deck. It just worked its way out due to just overall flooding of new dragons that came out. But 3-mana Planeswalker, you can +1 it to loot a card. You could +1 to add 2 mana of any color, or 2 mana of any combination in your mana pool, but you have to spend it to cast a dragon. And then you can -7 to create 4 5/5s. Really, you're using this to kind of ramp you to be able to curve out a dragon. Usually, you know, if it's a little bit later in the game, the same turn or the following turn, you could use it to turbo out Lathliss. And kind of when you need to, you can loot away cards to kind of cycle and see some different things. And then if it ever does happen, it can make 4 5/5 dragons. But it's really in there just to kind of turbo out something like Lathliss, because you play this on turn 3, you play a land turn 4, you +1 to add, you know, a total of 6 mana to your mana pool. And then you're playing Lathliss. So Shiv and Devastator. So you want to be able to like cast Lathliss and then cast a dragon, ideally, especially if it's like turn 6 or later. If you can turbo out Lathliss, you'll probably just end up playing Lathliss. But later in the game, you want to play Lathliss and a dragon. So this is where this comes in. Early game, you know, it's a cheap little flying haster, but obviously it scales. It can be very big. There's some treasures in here. There's some big mana stuff that red can do. And there's also some stuff in the considering section that is just good with this, but it's a very flexible mana value dragon. It could come down for 2 mana. It could come down for 20 mana. And it's just going to scale with the game. And it's got flying and haste. Not only are we in red, but we're in mono red, so Dockside Extortionist is just kind of an all-star here. Makes a lot of mana in the form of artifacts, which is nice. Kind of helps us out a little bit. And it's Dockside Extortionist, not a ton to say. Reckless Barbarian. I haven't had a chance to really play with this card in person yet, but I do like the theory of it. So it's a 2/2 dragon for 2, and when you're done with it, it just rituals for 2 red mana. So you can, at the right turn of the game, cast Lathliss, cast Reckless Barbarian, make a 5/5, sack the Barbarian, you know, on a later turn to add 2 mana, cast another dragon, make another 5/5. So it just kind of, again, scales you. But it fits really well on the curve at 2 mana. Playing this early, you're not mad playing this turn 2, and you're not mad sacking it on turn 3 or turn 4. Chaos Dragon, this is a 3-mana dragon with flying and haste. It must attack each combat. And it's got a cool little chaos effect, right? Hence the name, Chaos Dragon. At the beginning of combat, each player rolls a d20. If one of our opponents had the highest result, Chaos Dragon can't attack those players or their planeswalkers as combat. So all your opponents roll a dice. The player or players with the highest roll are protected, but then you could attack anybody else. So you're just hitting somebody every turn. It doesn't really matter who you hit. You just want to play this. You just want to attack. You want to do red things. You want to turn things sideways. But more importantly, once Lathliss is on the board, you play Lathliss, you play Chaos Dragon, you make a 5/5. This thing has haste. It's going to get in there for some damage. You're red. You're just going to turn things sideways. That's kind of what you do. Dragon Speaker Shaman. I kind of wanted to mix up the ramp a bit. I wanted some artifact ramp. I wanted some creature ramp because I don't want to get completely crippled by a board wipe, but I also don't want to get completely crippled by a Vandal Blast or something like that. So Dragon Speaker Shaman is 3 total mana, 2/2. Dragons cost 2 less to cast. Stuff like this in a 5-color deck like Dragon, I'm not a super fan of, but when you're dealing in mono red in a vacuum and some of the things are much more top heavy, something like this is actually a very good choice. You could always slot in the Goblin one, but I think the extra mana for the double reduction is much better. Gadrick the Crown Scourge. So this is a 5/4 flyer for only 3 mana. But the caveat here is it cannot attack unless you have 4 more artifacts. But at the beginning of the end step, you create a treasure token for each non-token creature that died. So with something like this, it is essentially a 3 mana dragon, and it's big. And you want it to attack as soon as possible. So, you know, you could have shotgunned something off like a Dockside. You see Hellkite Tyrant down here to steal stuff. But you do play a lot of artifacts in the deck. So that's where this card becomes good at kind of all stages of the game, right? You can play it on turn 3, and it's a body, and it can kind of wall up. And, you know, as you kind of accumulate more artifacts, then it can be turned on. Or you could get your artifact ramp early, cast Lathliss, cast a Gadrick, make the token, and then Gadrick is live as a 5/4 flyer. So this is something that would have to be tested just a little bit, just because it could kind of be bad, but it also could be very good, and it also makes treasures and artifacts, which is really nice. But I just kind of like it. It fits, again, on the curve nice at 3 mana. This is a favorite of mine. This is something that's I'm trying to put back in my Dragon deck. Again, space is a thing, but this is a 5 mana value dragon, but it does cost 1 less to cast for each land your opponents control that make it colorless. Flyer, but when it comes to the battlefield, you can destroy target non-basic land. So this thing's going to come out usually for like 4 mana at worst, sometimes just double red, and it's going to kill the Gaia's Cradles. It's going to kill any utility land, the War Rooms, just anything, the Yavimaya Hollows, things like that. It's just going to nuke instantly and just get them out of the way. You want to have ways to interact, 1 or 2 ways to interact with lands in decks, just because you're going to have those degenerate players like myself that when you're going for a high-powered game, right, you're going to play the things like Gaia's Cradle. So it's just nice to have things to deal with it. And it can be cast for as cheap as 2 mana. Swashbuckler Extraordinaire. Kind of, again, circling back to my Dragon deck. If you've seen it, you've seen this guy. When it enters the battlefield, you create a treasure. So you're kind of storing mana for the following turn, which is really nice. But it also makes a treasure, which is an artifact. So you have any artifact synergies that triggers as well. But whenever one or more creatures you control attacks, you could sack a treasure, and that creature gains double strike. So it's just kind of a way to push through for some big damage. But it is a 3 mana dragon that essentially refunds a mana. So triggers your Lathliss. Thunderbreak Regent, 4 mana dragon, 4/4 flyer. But whenever any dragon you control becomes the target of a spell or ability, it deals 3 damage to that player. So not super effective early in the game, but as the game kind of progresses on, you get to the grind game, this does add up. So basically your dragons have ward, deal 3 damage to the player. But it is a 4 mana dragon that, again, you could double spell with Lathliss, because 4 mana, especially if you have your artifacts and your treasures and stuff going off. Not unheard of to double spell with something like that. But it is important that it says deal 3 damage, because we have a card or 2 in here that scales with dealing damage that I'm really excited to play. So we'll get to that later. But yeah, not bad. It'll add up after a while. Another 4 mana dragon here at Sushi. 4 mana, 4/4 flying trample. When this card dies, you could choose one. Exile the top 2 cards of your library, and you may play those cards this turn. Or you create 3 treasure tokens. So it's a little bit of card draw. It's a little bit of ramp when it dies. You just kind of throw it out there. Again, trigger your Lathliss. Everything in here triggers Lathliss, so I'm probably going to stop saying it after some point. But a little bit of card draw, a little bit of ramp built into a dragon. Ganax, again, stolen from my Dragon deck. It's a 5 mana flyer. Whenever this card or another dragon enters the battlefield, you create a treasure. Glorybringer. This is interesting because it falls nice on the curve at the 5 mana. It's a flyer. It has haste. It has a decent-sized body. And whenever this card attacks, you can exert it, so it won't untap during the next untap phase. But it just deals 4 damage to something. So it can kill anything with toughness 4 or less, which is actually most creatures in the game right now. It kills a lot. There are some things it can't deal with, but it deals with most things. So it's a nice little removal spell on a dragon. And again, it dealing damage synergizes with some other nifty things we have in here. Leyline Tyrant is a 4 mana dragon flyer. You don't lose red mana when steps and phases end, and when it dies, you may pay any amount of red. and you may deal that much damage to any target. So this is another card that would need a little bit of testing just because I've never played with this in paper before. It seems pretty good in theory, but more importantly, it's a 4-mana 4/4 dragon that kind of allows you to store up some mana and then nuke something when it dies. Manaform Hellkite, when this card came out, I was really excited. I feel like it has a spot in here. So it's a 4-mana 4/4 flyer. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, create an XX red dragon creature token. Where X is the spell's mana value, it has haste, and you exile it. So if you cast this, and then you cast a 5-mana spell, you'll make a 5/5 haster, which is really nice. Again, more dragon bodies, trigger your dragon tempest and things like that. Again, think it fits in there nice. Territorial Hellkite, it's a 4-mana 6/5 with flying and haste. Again, this fits into kind of just turning things sideways and beating face strategy. At the beginning of At the beginning of combat, choose an opponent at random that Territorial Hellkite did not attack last combat, and then it must attack. So basically, it attacks, but it cannot attack a player it attacked the previous turn. So kind of falls into the same realm as Chaos Dragon, but it's just a big, dumb dragon body, and it doesn't cost a lot of mana. It just hits a different player every turn. Old Faithful here, Goldspan Dragon. Excuse me. 5-mana 4/4 flying haste, makes a treasure token, and all treasures tap for 2. Just a standard good dragon. Hoarding Dragon. This is an interesting one. I really like this card in here. Because you're mono red, you do have a lot of artifacts, but there is some artifacts in here that are quite powerful for the deck. So 5-mana 4/4 flyer. When this card enters the battlefield, you exile an artifact from your library, and when it dies, you put it into your hand. So it's a nice, cool little tutor, and being in mono red, we don't get a ton of things like that. Nesting Dragon. Again, in my Dragon deck, it's a 5-mana 5/4 flying. Landfall, create a 0/2 egg. When it dies, you create a 2/2 flyer with fire breathing. This just makes more dragons. This makes Dragon Tempest insane, right? Basically, landfall, deal damage to something, and then gives you a little bit of board wipe insurance because they hatch when they die. But there's a lot of like fetches and things like that in here to get it triggered multiple times. But you're just making multiple dragon bodies off of just playing the game of Magic. Scourge of Valkis, it's 5-mana, basically Dragon Tempest on a stick, and it has fire breathing. One of the better cards in the deck, especially once you start getting snowballing with Lathliss. You can play this on turn 5, Lathliss turn 6, maybe double spelled into 2 dragons on turn 7, and that's if you didn't ramp it all, right? If you ramped it all a turn earlier, and then you're just kind of snowballing in damage. Another good one here, Tear the Peaks, it's a flyer. Spells your opponents cast at target Tear of the Peaks, costs an additional 3 life, and whenever a creature enters the battlefield, it deals damage to a target equal to its power. Wrathful Red. So this is an interesting one as well that a lot of people do enjoy. I haven't had a ton of time to test it on paper, but a lot of people enjoy something like this. It's a 5-mana 5/5 flyer, and whenever a dragon you control is dealt damage, it deals that much damage to any target. So a lot of really cool hidden synergies with things like Blasphemous Act. Basically, you know, your dragons are unblockable with flying anyway, but if you're playing against like a Kalia deck or another deck with some flyers in it, even chum blockers, like it just allows things to be a bit more evasive, and if they throw chump blockers or big blockers in the way, you're just going to deal damage to stuff. Akum Hellkite. This is another theory crafting card. It's a 6-mana 4/4 flyer, landfall. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you deal a damage to any target, but if it's a mountain, you'll deal 2. So with one of the damage amplifiers in your deck, this thing can stack up easy, but hey, you know, let's say you play a fetch land, you could deal a damage to something, sack it, get a mountain, deal 2 damage to something else. I mean, that's 3 damage. You're killing most small things, most dwarfs. You know, I'll use that to kill a Deathrite Shaman all day. You know, halt an elf ball deck, or just throw it at somebody's face. A classic here, Ancient Copper, 6-mana flyer, 6/5, and whenever it deals damage to a player, roll a d20 and make that many treasures. Not a ton to say. One of my favorite mono red dragons, Drakaseth. This guy just is a complete brick, just a brick shit house, so to speak. He's just a beast. It's a 7 mana 7/7 flyer. When it attacks, you deal 4 damage to target and 3 damage to any 2 other targets. So you're just going to kill anything 4 toughness or less, and then another 2 other things with 3 toughness or less. This thing's awesome. I like dragon sets a lot. Hellkite Tyrant, 6 total mana, flying, trample. Whenever Hellkite Tyrant deals combat damage to a player, you gain control of all their artifacts. And if you have 20 or more artifacts during your upkeep, you win the game. You probably won't ever get that off, but it's just a nice little way to punish artifact-heavy decks. Get some extra ramp in there, get some extra utility, or even just kind of halt your opponent's artifact strategies. Scourge of the Throne, flying with Dethrone, and when it attacks the player with the most life, you get additional combat. Just a game ender. One of our board wipes, Balefire Dragon, 7 mana flyer. When it deals combat damage to a player, you deal that much damage to each creature. So you have a deck that spams tokens, and this connects with that player. You're going to wipe their whole board out. Null Spine Dragon. This is a odd one, but I really do like it. It's a 7 mana 7/5. When it enters the battlefield, you may discard your hand and draw cards equal to the damage dealt to target opponent this turn. So let's say you have 4 cards in hand. You connected for 10 damage to a player. On your second main phase, you cast that. You'll discard your 4 and you'll draw 10. Really nice. Udvara Hellkite is 8 mana. And whenever dragon you control attacks, you make a 6/6 with flying. Pretty straightforward. This is definitely the top end of our curve, but I feel like it does warrant a spot here. This is a new card. I think this card is awesome. There are some other cards you could play in its place, but I like the ability to flash it out. So it's a 9 mana 5/5, but not really. It has Artifact Offering, so you can cast this spell as if it had flash by sacrificing an artifact. Then you deduct that artifact's mana value from Blast Furnace Hellkite. So at instant speed, let's say you sacrifice an artifact with 3 mana. It'll take 3 off the cost, right? So this would then cost 4 red, 6 mana, flying with double strike, and all your creatures have double strike at that point. So it's a nice way just to kill somebody out of nowhere. And that is our Dragon Suite. What do we have? 30 total creatures. That would be 28 dragons. So not bad for a mono red deck. I think that's kind of the top end of where you want to be. We have some sorceries. A lot of utility stuff here, but we have Vandal Blast just to deal with artifacts, and you could overload it. A little bit of card draw and Reckless Impulse. 2 mana. You can exile the top 2 cards of your library, and until the end of your next turn, you may play those cards. Rob the Archives, which is the same thing, but it has Casualty 1. So if you wanted to sack something off. MDFCs are fantastic in general, but in mono decks, I really like them as well. It is an untapped mountain for 3 life on one side, and on this side, you could just deal some damage. Just a modal capability of it. We're in mono red, and we're kind of designed on casting our commander, so Jessica's Will is just kind of an all-star here. Wheel of Misfortune, it's just a little bit of card draw in red. And I'll go with an Imposing Grandeur as well. Card draw is limited. We have things like Rob the Archive, Reckless Impulse, as well as some other things, but a lot of it is, either impulsive draw or looting, where you're discarding and then drawing the same amount of cards. So having something like Wheel of Misfortune to just pick up extra cards, and Imposing Grandeur, kind of in the same theory. Imposing Grandeur is a little bit new, but it's a 5 mana sorcery. Each player may discard their hand and draw cards equal to the greatest mana value of their commander. So could you have some opponents draw some cards off this? Yes, but ideally you kind of need that because you're in red. A board wipe and Blasphemous Act. Some instants here. Tybalt's Trickery. It's just a counterspell. It's just a way to protect your board. Being in mono red, you don't have a ton of ways to protect your board, so this is kind of how you do it. Wild Magic Surge is one of my favorite mono red remover spells. It kills any permanent. They get a little something back, but the downside is minimal. Chaos Warp, again, good pinpoint removal. Deflecting Swat is kind of a pseudo counterspell, right? If they go to target something, you could change the target for free. And Valakut Awakening is a little bit of card draw on a land. So we have our artifacts, and this is where most of our ramp is. We have the obligatory Soul Ring, the Arcane Signet. I know we're in mono red, but it's just a 2 mana rock. Endless Atlas, which is kind of newer, but it's a 2 mana artifact. And then for 2 and tap it, you can draw a card if you control 3 or more lands with the same name, which we're in mono red. Not very hard. It's just continuous card draw overall. You can play, there's one card, Idol of Oblivion, that allows you just, if you made a token this turn, you could tap it for a card. You can play that over this if you wanted to. That might be a little bit better now that I think about it. But Endless Atlas is live early game, and Idol of Oblivion, you can't really draw cards till after you have Lathliss out. So some testing there. Lightning Greaves, this isn't in here for the haste as much as it is for the Shroud, because you want to be able to protect Lathliss when it hits the board. Ruby Medallion, mono red deck. Swifty Boots, same thing. You know, the haste is nice, but you're really here for the hexproof. So Carnelian Orb of Dragonkind is a 3-mana artifact that taps to add a red. And then if it's spent to cast a dragon, it gains haste. So this serves a couple purposes. It's an artifact, it's ramp, and it gives something haste, which is really nice. So it kind of fills a different criteria. You want to give some things haste in this deck because you want to be able to connect with things immediately. Cursed Mirror, another 3-mana artifact. You'll notice in some other deck profiles, I'm not a huge fan of 3-mana rocks. But being in not green and having a commander that costs 6 mana, I feel like 3-mana rocks have a home here. So we actually leaned into those a little bit further. Cursed Mirror, 3-mana red 3-mana red artifact, taps for a red, and you may have it enter the battlefield as a copy of a creature. And then it has haste. So you can have this enter as a copy of your best non-legendary dragon. Dragon's Horde is just a little bit of card draw and a little bit of ramp, all stapled on an artifact. Hammer of Perforos is here just to give your board haste. So giving your board haste in this deck is better than giving one creature haste most of the time. So you'll see some of that peppered through in here. Hazoret's Monument is a 3-mana artifact that red creature spells cost 1 less to cast. And whenever you cast a creature spell, you can loot, which is really nice. Probably the best card in the deck, or one of the best cards in the deck, is Panharmonicon. This is going to double up on all your enter the battlefield triggers, right? So this doubles up Lathliss. You could double up Cursed Mirror with some cool stuff. And a lot of your dragons have these really cool enter the battlefield effects. Akum Hellkite, Scourge of Valkis, Terror of the Peaks, Nesting Dragon. There's just a lot of really cool dragons in here that have ETBs. So you just have some hidden synergies outside of Lathliss. But doubling up Lathliss triggers and you have something like Hammer of Perforos is pretty nuts. Scepter of Eternal Glory, I was just kind of looking for a home to play a card like this. But this is a 4-mana that taps to add a mana of any color. But if you have 3 or more lands with the same name, it adds 3 mana, which is really nice. And then Vanquisher's Banner is a 5-mana wow. 5-mana artifact that basically anthems all your creatures, and whenever you cast a creature of the chosen type, you draw a card, so a little bit of card draw. On to Enchantments, Bitter Reunion. This card's awesome. I played with this card in a limited environment, not a constructed environment, but I feel like it translates into this deck really well. It's 2-mana enchantment. When it enters the battlefield, you may discard a card and draw 2 cards. So when it comes into play, you're cycling out. And then you can pay 1 and sack it to give all your creatures haste. I feel like that's pretty nuts. Probably one of the best cards in the deck, if not the best card. Dragon Tempest. Aggravated Assault. I felt like there was some really good mana acceleration in here. And the deck has a lot of attack triggers, so Aggravated Assault can kind of just close out games or give you insane value, which is what I like. Outpost Siege is basically here for some impulse draw, and if you wanted to give yourself some board wipe insurance, I guess you could choose dragons, but mostly in here to give you a little bit of impulse draw. A card I was alluding to from the start, one of my favorites, Fire Emancipation. If a source you control would deal damage, it deals triple. So Dragon Tempest triples up. A card we'll talk about in a minute, Warstorm Surge triples up. All of your creatures that deal damage, your Akum Hellkite, they triple up. Your Balefire triples up. Your Wrathful triples up. Your Glurbringer triples up. Your Thunderbreak Regent triples up. So a lot of really cool hidden synergies there, which I really like. And Warstorm Surge, which in theory, I feel like this card plays really well. But whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, it deals damage to its power to any target. So you have this out. You cast Lathliss. Lathliss is going to deal its power to something. Then you cast a dragon. That dragon is going to deal damage equal to its power to something. And then you're going to make a 5/5, and that deals damage equal to its power to something. So you have two really big do nothing enchantments in here, but if they stick and you could double spell, which is kind of what we're aiming for here. Create some big plays. So that are the spells. We're going to go with the lands. We have 35 lands, 37 if you include the MDFCs, but we have some fetches in Arid Mesa, Bloodstained Mire. Bonder's Enclave, it's just taps to add a colorless, and if you have Ferocious, which is a creature with power 4 or greater, you can draw a card. Buried Rune for some graveyard hate. Cavern of Souls, like high power meta, right? We want to protect our spells. Command Beacon, you don't want to cast Lathliss a bunch of times. It just costs way too much mana being at 6. So if she dies, being able to put her back in your hand to cast her again is great. Great Furnace, it's just an artifact land, so it has artifact synergies. Haven is in here because it taps to add a mana of any color to cast a dragon, but you can use it as utility to regrow a dragon in your hand. 18 Mountains. I'm wearing mono red, so Nykthos slots in nicely. Prismatic Vista, Scalding Tarn for some more fetches. Scavenger Grounds for some graveyard hate. Spine Rock Knoll just because it allows us to cast a free spell. Strip Mine to destroy some lands. Valakut, again, it's in here to deal free damage. We have a lot of mountains. War Room, we're in a monocolor deck. Basically, tap 3, pay a life, draw a card, and another fetch in Wooded Hills. So that is the deck. I feel like this deck is pretty cool, especially for like a version 1 untested version. But let me know what you guys think. Let me know if you have any suggestions. Kind of going down some of the cards I was experimenting with. All these cards are very good, but some of the highlights here are like Rapacious Dragon, I feel like might have a home here. Spawn of Thraxus might have a home here. With more testing, something like Gamble would obviously fit in. It's a tutor. Kazul's Fury is kind of cool. Bolt Bend. This was brought to me by one of my subscribers in our Discord. Bolt Bend's a really cool card. Obviously, some just classic Ram cards. Glittering Stockpile, I really want to fit in here. Maybe I would cut the Scepter for it. The Scepter just adds more mana on the spot, but Glittering Stockpile, like once you're done with it, I'm just going to add 10 mana to my mana pool. And some other big ones in here, Helltorn. Curse of Opulence is kind of cool in theory. If you don't like the Bitter Reunion or something, I forget what it's called. If you don't like Bitter Reunion, you could always play something like Fervor. Valakut Exploration, I think, would fit well in here after some testing. Berserker's Onslaught or Gratuitous Violence is good to double up damage. And then there was just some lands in there as well. But, it does have some pretty decent test hands if you want to Goldfish this. But that is the deck. It has a pretty solid curve. But yeah, let me know what you guys think. This was a blast to brew. This is something that, maybe I'd experiment building in person at some point. But if you guys know of anything else, maybe something that I overlooked or missed when building Lathliss, please let me know. And if you guys wanted to view any of the other decks I've done in the past, I have some cool private things I've been working on that I'll show to you guys at some point. But you could view all my past deck techs in there as well. Be sure to use and bookmark that TCG affiliate link for me. Greatly appreciated. And remember, subscribe, guys. I'm almost at 500. I have some really cool things planned for 1,000. I'm going to do a bit of a giveaway. Jeez, I cannot talk today. So I'll do a giveaway. I want to start playing with subscribers through Discord over something like Spell Table. So I have a lot of really cool stuff planned. Some of you guys want an updated version of Luca's Voltron deck. So a lot of cool stuff in the works. So again, your feedback, your subscribing, your comments, your likes, all super appreciated. Thank you guys very much and have a good one. I'm out.